Marina thought she had found the man of her dreams, a beautiful wedding, a new life, and a promise of forever. But what she didn't know, what no one told her, was that her husband had a secret, a hidden will that would change everything. When she found it, she didn't cry. No, she decided to play the game better than anyone ever expected. Marina had never dreamed of riches. She grew up in a small town in the Philippines, where life was simple yet full of love. Her parents had worked hard, her father as a fisherman and her mother selling handmade crafts in the market. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and that was enough. So when she met Robert, a charming, wealthy businessman during his travels in Manila, she hadn't been looking for love. But Robert was different, or at least she thought he was. He was everything a woman could want: handsome, successful, and kind. Unlike other men who flaunted their wealth, Robert seemed genuine, at least at first. They fell in love quickly. Robert showered her with affection, gifts, and promises of a life she had never even imagined. "You are all I want, Marina," he whispered on their wedding night. "Not my family, not their expectations, just you and me." For a moment, she believed him. But the moment she stepped into his family's grand estate, the first cracks in their perfect love story began to show. The house was massive, practically a mansion, with white pillars stretching toward the sky and golden chandeliers glittering inside. It was breathtaking and intimidating. Marina swallowed hard as she walked through the doors of her new home. Robert's mother, Victory, stood at the entrance. Her dress was flawless, her pearls glistening under the light, and yet her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome," she said, though her voice was cold. "I hope you'll find your place here." Marina wanted to believe the woman would warm up to her, but something in Victory's gaze told her the truth. She was not welcome. And Victory wasn't the only one. Robert's two sisters barely acknowledged her, and his brother gave her a polite nod. But no one treated her like family. They only saw one thing: a Filipina from a poor family who had somehow trapped their beloved Robert. Marina didn't let it show, but she felt the weight of their judgment. "Don't worry about them," Robert whispered later that night, holding her close. "They just need time. Once they see how wonderful you are, they'll love you just as much as I do." Marina smiled weakly. She wanted to believe him, but deep down, something whispered a warning in her heart. This wasn't just a family warming up to a new member. This was something darker. And soon, she'd find out just how deep the betrayal went. Marina had thought marriage meant gaining a new family, but she quickly realized she was nothing more than an outsider. The whispers, the cold stares, the way they dismissed her presence, it was as if she didn't exist. But what hurt the most was the man who promised to protect her did nothing at all. Marina tried her best. She woke up early to prepare breakfast, something she had always done back home. She wasn't used to maids and cooks. In the Philippines, family meals were made with love, by hands that worked all morning in the kitchen. But when she brought a plate of fresh mango slices and warm coffee to Robert's mother, Victory barely looked up from her newspaper. "Oh," she muttered, eyeing the food with disdain. "You don't need to do that, dear. We have staff for simple things like this." Marina froze, heat rushing to her cheeks. It was just mangoes and coffee, a small gesture. Why did it feel like she had just committed a crime? Robert's sisters giggled under their breath. "She'll get tired of playing this sweet little housewife soon enough," one of them whispered, loud enough for Marina to hear. Her hands clenched under the table, but she said nothing. At first, she thought she was imagining things. Maybe she was just overthinking the way they ignored her when she spoke. Maybe it was just a coincidence that conversations would shift the moment she entered the room. But as the days passed, it became impossible to ignore. At dinner, she was never asked about her day. When Robert's family hosted parties, she was introduced as an afterthought. Not as his wife, but as if she were some temporary guest. And the worst part? Robert did nothing. "Robert," she said one night as they lay in bed, "do you notice how your family treats me?" He sighed, rubbing his temple. "Marina, you're overthinking again." "I don't think I am," she replied. "They just need time," he insisted. "Time?" Robert, it's been months. They act like I don't belong here. He pulled her close, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. You belong with me. That's all that matters. For a moment, she wanted to believe him. But love isn't just words, it's action. And Robert's actions told her one thing. She was on her own. Marina tried not to let it get to her. She told herself she was strong, that she had lived through worse. But every day, the weight of their silent rejection grew heavier. One afternoon, while heading toward the study, she overheard a hushed conversation between Robert's mother and his sisters. She doesn't belong in this family, one of his sisters whispered. She won't last, Victory said coolly. Robert will come to his senses. He always listens to me. Marina's blood turned ice cold. They weren't just ignoring her. They were waiting for her to fail. And worse, they expected Robert to turn against her too. That night, as she lay in bed beside her husband, she realized something painful. She had never truly been welcome in this house. And if she didn't find a way to stand her ground, they would erase her completely. But what Marina didn't know yet, what no one expected, was that she would soon uncover something that would change everything. And when she did, she would no longer be the quiet, obedient wife they thought she was. Marina wanted to believe Robert truly loved her, that despite his family's cruelty, he was different. But then she found the drawer, locked, hidden, and guarded like a secret never meant to be uncovered. And when she finally opened it, what she found inside shattered her entire world. Marina had always respected boundaries. She was never the type to pry or dig into things that weren't hers. But the moment Marina saw that drawer, something deep inside her told her to pay attention. It was in Robert's study, nestled inside his heavy mahogany desk. Unlike the others, this drawer was locked. At first, she dismissed it. Of course, a wealthy businessman like Robert would have personal documents, financial records, work contracts, things she had no business snooping around in. But then came the small things. The way Robert's demeanor changed whenever she walked near his desk, the way his hand instinctively reached for the drawer as if checking that it was still locked, the way his expression tensed whenever she mentioned organizing the room. And then, one night, as she folded his clothes in their bedroom, she noticed something else. He always carried the drawer key in his wallet.
Why?
A few days later, Marina finally asked about it. Robert, she said casually one evening, what's in that locked drawer in your study? His reaction was immediate. His hand froze midair as he reached for his drink. His usually warm eyes flickered with something unreadable before he forced a casual smile. Oh, just business stuff. He took a sip of his whiskey, as if that was the end of the conversation. Marina tilted her head. Business stuff. Yeah, you wouldn't be interested. His tone was dismissive, but that wasn't what unsettled her. It was the way his fingers tightened around his glass, like he was afraid she would ask more. She could have pushed, could have insisted, but she knew Robert well enough. If he was hiding something, he wouldn't just hand her the truth. So instead, she smiled sweetly. Okay. And from that moment on, she waited, because secrets never stay buried forever. The key to the truth. The opportunity came sooner than expected. One evening, Robert rushed out for a last-minute meeting. He kissed her on the forehead and left in a hurry, grabbing his coat and his phone, but not his wallet. Marina stared at it, sitting innocently on the counter. Her heart pounded. For a moment, she hesitated. She wasn't that kind of wife. She wasn't someone who went through her husband's things. But then she remembered his mother's words. Robert will come to his senses. He always listens to me. And suddenly, the fear of what she didn't know became greater than the fear of looking. With shaking hands, she picked up the wallet and pulled out the small silver key. It was time to find out what her husband was hiding. The will. Marina stepped into Robert's study, the dim light casting long shadows across the room. Her breath was shaky as she knelt before the desk, slipping the key into the lock.
Click.
The drawer slid open. Inside was a thick, worn folder, as if it had been opened many times before. She pulled it out with trembling fingers and flipped the cover open. The first page made her freeze. A legal document.
A will.
As she read the contents, her blood ran cold. Robert's entire fortune, every single cent, was left to his mother and siblings. Not a word about her. Not her name. Not even a mention of a spouse. It was as if she didn't exist. Marina clutched the paper, her breath ragged. Her husband, the man she loved, the man who claimed to love her, had never planned to include her in his future. This marriage, it had never been about love. And in that moment, something inside Marina snapped. She had been kind. She had been patient. She had endured the whispers, the humiliation, the cold rejection from his family. But this was betrayal. And if Robert thought she would stay silent, if he thought she would accept this like the quiet, obedient wife they assumed she was, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Because Marina wasn't going to cry. She was going to play the game better than they ever expected. A new plan. Marina's heart raced as she stared at the will. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was cold, deliberate, and planned. Long before she ever said, "I do," Robert had built a future without her in it. But fate has a way of revealing secrets. And what Marina was about to discover next would change everything. That night, she lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Robert had returned late from his meeting, sliding under the covers without a second thought, as if his world was perfectly intact. But Marina's world? It had just shattered. She turned her head slightly, looking at him in the dim moonlight. Did he even love her? Had he ever? Her chest tightened, but she swallowed the pain. This wasn't the time to break. This was the time to think, to understand, to find the truth. The next morning, Marina woke up early, her mind sharper than ever. She had always believed in fate, that when something was meant to be uncovered, life would give you the smallest push in the right direction. And that push came in the form of Robert's mother. Victory was having coffee in the grand dining hall, her back straight, her pearls shining under the morning light. She didn't even glance at Marina as she spoke, her voice smooth but dripping with something mocking. "So," Victory said, stirring her tea slowly, "Robert tells me you're thinking about learning more about his business affairs." Marina's stomach tightened. She hadn't mentioned a single thing to Robert about what she found in the drawer. So, why would he suddenly tell his mother something like that? Unless he already suspected she knew something. Marina forced a polite smile. "Oh, just curiosity," she said, keeping her voice light. "A wife should know these things, don't you think?" Victory finally looked at her then, a small smirk forming. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing, dear." Marina's hands clenched beneath the table. That wasn't just a remark. That was a warning. The hidden account. The conversation left her rattled, but it also confirmed something important. Victory and the rest of Robert's family knew. They knew about the will. They knew Robert had excluded her. And they were waiting for the moment she found out. Which meant she had to stay ahead of them. That afternoon, while Robert was out, Marina decided to do something bold. She remembered something, his private office on the second floor. Unlike his study, Robert barely let her in there, claiming it was his personal workspace. But Marina had always found it odd that the room was constantly locked. If there were more secrets, that's where she'd find them. Slipping into the office, she quickly scanned the room, the desk, the bookshelves, the cabinets. Her eyes landed on a set of folders stacked neatly in a drawer. She pulled them out, her heart pounding. And that's when she saw it. A bank statement. Not from Robert's usual accounts, the ones she had access to. A hidden account. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages, her pulse roaring in her ears. Large withdrawals. Frequent transfers. And the recipient. A name she didn't recognize. Marina grabbed her phone, quickly snapping photos of every page. This wasn't just a secret account. This was money being moved away from her.
But why?
And more importantly, who was he sending it to? Marina took a shaky breath. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't a mistake. Robert had been preparing for something. And if he thought she was just going to sit back and wait for the inevitable, he was dead wrong. Because now Marina wasn't just hurt. She was angry. And she was going to find out the truth, no matter what it took. Marina hesitated, glancing around nervously. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "Yesterday a large amount." Her stomach dropped. Yesterday he had just sent more money. Her heart pounded. Who was he sending it to? That night, Marina did something she never imagined she would do. She followed her husband. Robert had told her he had a late meeting, but Marina knew better now. She watched from a distance as he drove across the city, weaving through traffic until he reached a quiet, upscale neighborhood. Then, she saw him park outside a small, elegant house. Her hands gripped the steering wheel as she watched him step out, check his phone, and ring the doorbell. The door swung open, and standing there, smiling warmly at him, was a woman Marina had never seen before. The world tilted. Marina felt like she couldn't breathe. She had expected betrayal. She had expected deceit. But this was something else entirely. Robert stepped inside, and the door closed behind him. Just like that, her husband disappeared into another life. A life where she didn't exist. A life he had built without her. A life he had planned all along. Marina sat there for a long time, her pulse pounding in her ears. Tears stung at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. Robert thought he was in control. He thought he had won. But what he didn't know was that Marina wasn't just some helpless wife waiting to be discarded. She was smart. She was patient. And now she had a plan. A plan that would destroy everything he thought was untouchable. Marina had been a fool once, but never again. Robert thought he could play his games in secret, but he had underestimated the one thing he never saw coming, her intelligence. Now, the tables were about to turn. And when she was done, he wouldn't even see it coming. Marina drove home in silence, her mind racing. Her heart had been shattered before, but this time, her heart wasn't the only thing at stake. Robert had been preparing to leave her. The secret will, the hidden bank account, the woman in the house. It all pointed to one undeniable truth. He was planning his exit. But before he could discard her like trash, Marina was going to destroy him first. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, formulating a plan. She wasn't just going to confront Robert. She was going to take everything from him. But she had to be careful. She had to be smart. So, she made a list of everything she needed to do. Secure her own finances. Gather evidence. Find legal loopholes. And most importantly, stay calm. If Robert suspected for even a second that she knew, he would act first. So, she had to keep playing the role of the naive, loving wife. And that's exactly what she did. The next morning, Marina greeted Robert with a bright smile. "Good morning, love," she said, pouring his coffee. Robert, oblivious, kissed her cheek as if nothing had changed. But for Marina, everything had changed. She wasn't his wife anymore. She was his executioner. First, she handled her finances. Quietly, she opened a new account in her name and began transferring small amounts from their joint account every few days. Not enough to alert him, but enough that, when the time came, she wouldn't be left with nothing. She also photocopied every important document she could find, his financial records, his hidden bank statements, even the wills she had discovered. Because when the truth came out, she wasn't just going to expose him. She was going to bury him. But Marina didn't stop there. She needed proof of Robert's infidelity. So, she hired a private investigator. It wasn't hard. She had saved money from her previous job. And this was an investment in her future. The investigator was quick. Within a few days, Marina had photographs, videos, and even recorded phone calls. Robert and the woman he had been sneaking off to see. They had been together for months. The betrayal burned deep, but Marina swallowed the pain. Because now, she had everything she needed. Then came the legal preparation. Marina met with a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who listened intently as Marina laid out the entire story. When she was done, the lawyer leaned back, arms crossed. "You're smart," she said. "You've already done half my work for me." Marina smiled. "I need to be smart. I have too much to lose." The lawyer nodded. And you're about to gain even more. Because, as it turned out, Robert had made a crucial mistake. His hidden bank account? Some of that money belonged to Marina too. Since they were legally married, half of everything he owned was hers. And with the right legal maneuvering, she could freeze his assets before he ever had the chance to leave her. Marina's heart pounded in excitement. She wasn't just getting revenge. She was about to win everything. For the next few weeks, she continued to play the perfect wife. She cooked for him. She smiled at him. She even kissed him goodnight, all while knowing that soon his entire world was going to collapse. And when it did, she'd be the one standing on top. Robert had no idea what was coming. He thought he was in control. He thought he had everything figured out. But what he didn't realize was that the woman he underestimated had been playing him all along. The day had finally come. Marina had been patient. She had collected every piece of evidence, worked with her lawyer, and secured her finances. Now it was time to end this game. And Robert's birthday dinner? The perfect setting. The dining hall was elegant, candlelit, filled with soft music and laughter. Robert sat at the head of the table, grinning, basking in the attention. His mother, Victoria, raised a glass. "To my wonderful son," she said. "A man with a bright future ahead." Marina nearly laughed. A bright future? Not after tonight. Robert smiled, lifting his glass. "Thank you, everyone. And to my lovely wife," he added, turning to Marina, his hand covering hers. "For always being by my side." The moment was perfect. Marina took a deep breath and stood up. "Actually," she said, her voice calm but sharp, "I have a little surprise." The entire room watched as Marina pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. Robert's smile faltered. "What's this?" he asked. Her eyes met his, cold, unreadable. "I think you should read it." The moment he flipped it open, his face went pale. That night, Marina walked out of Robert's life. And she took everything he thought was his. His wealth, his control, his future. He thought he had won. But when Marina walked away, she didn't just leave him behind. She took the one thing he never expected. Everything. Months later, Marina sat by the ocean, the warm breeze against her skin. She had built a new life. One where she was in control. She wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. And Robert? Last she heard, he had left the city in disgrace. His family had disowned him. His once powerful status had crumbled to dust. But that wasn't her problem anymore. Because Marina had walked away. With her dignity, her strength, and a future that belonged entirely to her. She was in control. She wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. And Robert? Last she heard, he had left the city in disgrace. His family had disowned him. His once powerful status had crumbled to dust. But that wasn't her problem anymore. Because Marina had walked away. With her dignity, her strength, and a future that belonged entirely to her. Have you ever been underestimated, only to prove everyone wrong? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible stories.